Sam Bennett stepped onto the platform at Spencer Street Station, his overnight bag in hand. The grand old station bustled with commuters rushing to catch their evening trains home to the suburbs. Sam made his way to the ticket window, an old-fashioned setup with an actual human being behind the glass. "One ticket on the Overland to Adelaide, please," Sam said. The woman at the counter clicked away at her computer. "I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett," she said without much sympathy. "But a shared sleeper is all we have left. If you must travel on that day, you will have to share. If you can put your trip off for a day or two, you can have your pick of the solo cabins. They are more expensive, of course."
Sam sighed.
As a private investigator, his schedule was at the mercy of his clients. "I have to be there on Friday, so it has to be the overnight train on Thursday. I'll take the ticket, but tell them to stock up on decent whiskey. I'm going to need it, and so is my sleep buddy. You will have some time to yourself?" the ticket agent said as she printed his ticket. "Because your fellow passenger won't be boarding until Ararat. At least that's a few hours of peace," Sam thought. He was eager to start reading the new crime novel he'd picked up for the 10-hour journey. Sam made his way to Platform 2, where the stately Overland sat waiting to receive its passengers for the overnight haul to South Australia. He'd always preferred trains to planes. No invasive security, cramped seats, or barely edible food. Train travel harkened back to a more civilized era when the journey was part of the adventure. Following the instructions of the vintage-dressed train employee, complete with wide-brimmed Akubra hat, Sam waited patiently by his assigned carriage. Soon the doors opened and the porter ushered him aboard. Sam quickly found his sleeper cabin, stowed his bag, and headed to the bar car for a stiff drink and some snacks before dinner. Upon returning to his cabin, Sam claimed the top bunk, figuring his unknown companion could have the bottom when he boarded later that night. As the train horn trumpeted its impending departure, Sam gazed out the window at the controlled chaos of peak-hour commuters scurrying about the platforms. Right on time, the Overland lurched forward and slowly pulled out of the station. "If Mussolini were alive, he'd be proud," Sam muttered to himself with a smirk. The train complained and groaned as it negotiated the labyrinth of the rail yard, the wheels screeching at every change of direction. Once free of the Melbourne suburbs, the Overland accelerated and settled into a steady rhythm as it raced across the dry plains west of the city. Through the dimming light, Sam could just make out the dark silhouette of an extinct volcano the indigenous people called the Hill of Fire. As night swallowed the landscape, Sam switched on his reading light and cracked open his book. But the swaying of the train soon lulled him into a light sleep. Some time later, the sound of the cabin door opening roused him. A shadowy figure in a rumpled suit slipped inside, carefully placing a small cloth-wrapped bundle on the shelf before climbing into the lower bunk. Within minutes, the even cadence of the man's breathing told Sam he was deep asleep. The next morning, Sam awoke to a knock at the door as the porter arrived with their breakfast trays. His mysterious cabin mate remained dead to the world as Sam ate and perused the Adelaide newspaper someone had brought aboard during the night. A small article about a domestic shooting in Ararat caught his eye. A jealous husband had come home to find his wife in the arms of her gangster lover. In a fit of rage, he'd shot them both with his grandfather's service revolver before vanishing into the night. The wife had died while her lover remained in critical condition. With a shake of his head at the tragedy and violence of the human condition, Sam folded the paper and prepared to disembark as the Overland approached the Adelaide Parklands terminal. He didn't bother being quiet so as not to wake his companion. The poor bloke clearly needed the rest. Sam tipped the porter to let him sleep as long as possible. Stepping onto the platform into the furnace blast of an Adelaide morning, Sam hailed a cab to his hotel. Another dreary day of client meetings awaited him in the city of churches. He didn't relish spending more time than necessary here, but that's where the well-heeled law firm that had engaged his services was located. Something about not trusting sensitive information to phone calls or emails. It was all money in Sam's pocket as far as he was concerned. Back on the train, the mysterious passenger startled awake at the porter's gentle nudge. "Sorry, sir. I let you sleep as long as I could, as your friend requested." "What friend?" the man asked groggily, his suit even more disheveled than the night before. The gentleman who shared your cabin. He left this for you." The porter handed over a postcard of the Overland crossing a rail viaduct. On the back, a message was written in precise script. "Dear Mr. Park, I'm sorry your wife betrayed you. I understand the pain and rage that could drive a man to do what you did. It's not my place to turn you in, but if you harm anyone else, I will find you and you will regret it. I hope you had the sense to dispose of the remaining bullets before tossing the gun. Keep your head down and don't make me regret my compassion. A concerned fellow traveler." The man called Mr. Park stared at the card, his eyes filling with tears as the enormity of his actions crashed down upon him. He fell back onto the bunk, sobbing silently as the Overland carried him into an uncertain future. Meanwhile, Sam Bennett stepped out of his taxi in front of the marbled edifice of the law offices of Greenwood, Naismith and Tate. Another day, another wealthy client with more money than sense. At least the pay was good. And every once in a while, Sam got to exercise his own sense of justice, even if it was from the safe distance of an anonymous postcard. With a self-satisfied smile, he straightened his tie and pushed through the revolving doors, ready to see what secrets and lies the powerful people of Adelaide had in store for him today. As the morning sun climbed over the Adelaide hills, two men, as different as could be, went about their days. One was burdened by the weight of his crimes, a good man undone by passion and betrayal. The other earned his daily bread by navigating the gray spaces between right and wrong, between the law and justice. And yet, for a brief moment, their paths had crossed, two strangers passing in the night, bound together by the dark currents that run beneath even the most civilized veneer. The Overland continued its stately progress across the sunburnt country, bearing its cargo of 1,000 private stories, each a microcosm of the human condition in all its sordid glory. Love and hate, fidelity and betrayal, mercy and vengeance. All were playing out behind the closed doors of its sleeper cars. The train rolled on, impassive and eternal, a world unto itself suspended between the known and the unknown. In the dining car, a well-dressed woman flirted shamelessly with a man who was not her husband. Elsewhere, a father read fairy stories to lull his children to sleep in the strange environment of the moving train. A young couple, eyes alight with the adventurous spirit of youth, toasted each other with cheap champagne as they embarked on their first great journey together. All around, the mundane mixed with the momentous in the close confines of the train. Out in the world, headlines screamed their sensational tales. War looming in Europe. Prime Minister Menzies recalls Parliament. Rising tensions between Italy and Abyssinia. But inside the cocoon of the Overland, the cares of the world were held at bay, if only for a night. Here, there was only the rhythmic clatter of the wheels upon the rails, the murmur of conversations and the clink of glassware from the bar car, and the cloak of darkness pressing against the windows. As the Overland raced on through the Wimmera and across the mighty Murray River into South Australia, Sam reclined in his first-class seat and signaled the attendant for another whiskey. The familiar warmth spread through him as he gazed unseeingly at the passing Mallee scrub, his mind occupied with thoughts of the man now headed in the opposite direction, towards whatever fate awaited him in the aftermath of his actions. Would the police catch up with Mr. Park? Would the lover survive to identify him? Would the man turn himself in to face the consequences of his crime of passion? Sam would probably never know the answers. His role in the sordid drama had been brief but pivotal, a choice to extend mercy and a chance for redemption to a stranger, however undeserved it might be. It wasn't Sam's job to judge, only to apply his own jaded moral code as even-handedly as he could manage. He thought again of the headlines, of the great currents of history that were sweeping the world towards unknown shores. The wheels of politics and power ground on, just as they always had, heedless of the personal tragedies and triumphs that made up the fabric of real life. In the end, Sam figured, all any of them could do was play the hand they were dealt, to the best of their ability and according to the dictates of their conscience. The rest was up to the fates. As the train hurtled through the Mallee, he felt the events of the past 24 hours slipping away, receding into memory and mystery. Tomorrow would bring its own trials and tribulations, its own opportunities to do good or ill. For now, There was only the journey itself, and the uneasy peace of the Overland in the dark hours before the dawn. Here ends the tale of the Overland, and of Mr. Park, and of Sam Bennett, three threads briefly entangled in the great loom of life before unraveling and going each their separate way. Whether their fates would ever again intersect, only time would tell. But all would bear the marks of their encounter, for good or ill, in the pages of their own unfolding stories. Such is the nature of the human heart, and of the journeys that shape and change us on the railways and off. The story, inspired by the evocative original text, takes the central encounter on board the Overland overnight train and uses it as a lens to explore wider themes of morality, fate, and the human condition. Sam, the private eye, and the tragic figure of Mr. Park become symbols of the choices and moral gray areas that define real life as it is lived, in contrast to the black and white of sensational headlines. The train itself serves as a microcosm, a self-contained world where the full spectrum of human drama plays out in a confined space. The postcard becomes the fulcrum upon which the story turns, the embodiment of Sam's jaded compassion and the possibility of redemption even in the aftermath of terrible crimes. Descriptive language is used to paint a vivid picture of the train journey and its atmosphere, grounding the character studies in a strong sense of place and time. Interior monologues allow insight into Sam's worldview and the way the encounter impacts him. The ending is deliberately ambiguous, acknowledging that life is an ongoing journey and these characters have only intersected briefly as they each travel towards their own uncertain futures. The aim was to emulate the thoughtful and slightly melancholy tone of the original piece, while expanding on its themes and crafting a complete standalone story. By weaving together the intimate and the epic, the tale of the Overland becomes a meditation on the human experience in all its messy glory.